The board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Troop, Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderwoman Young, Alderman Conway, Alderman Ortman, Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Villa, Alderman Arnowitz, Alderman Wessels, Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Florida, Alderwoman Behringer, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Schmidt, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Ogilvie, Alderman Cone, Alderman Williamson, Alderman Carter, Alderwoman Cruzen, President Reed,
Here.
Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Villa, Alderwoman Howard, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman French, Alderwoman Cruzen, 24 present.
We have with us a number of special guests today. Up here at the dais, we have Elder and Reverend Solomon Williams and also Bishop Lawrence Wooten Kojic from Williams Temple. We will be led today in prayer by Bishop Lawrence Wooten.
Lord, we do thank you today, for this is the day that you have made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. We thank you that you woke us up this morning and started us on our way. We pray your blessing upon each and every one that's gathered here. Bless our mayor, president of the Board of Aldermen, each alderman and alderwoman. Bless all our officials. Lord, you said if we lack wisdom, ask of you. We ask you to give wisdom and blessing upon each and every official of this great city. Pour out on us, give us favor as we serve. And we thank you even right now as we go forth, and thank you for your presence, for we are gathered here in your name. Thank God. Amen.
Amen.
Beautiful prayer. We've been waiting a long time to get Bishop Wooten down here. Welcome back. We're going to have a very busy session, even starting out today. We will spin with our regular order of business, take up our courtesy resolution calendar. I move for adoption of our courtesy resolution calendar, seconded by Alderman from the 20th. We're going to take up first resolution number, let me find mine. Alderman from the 4th, would you like to approach the dais? For resolution number 221.
Good morning. Since this resolution is for Donna Booker's pastor, and I know she stopped reading for a while, but I'm going to ask Donna to read this resolution for us, because I know you don't want to hear me ramp and rave. I might start preaching. Donna, would you please read this resolution? Thank you. Pastor Solomon Williams, would you step forward, please? Bishop Wooten.
Whereas we pause in our deliberations to honor and congratulate Administrative Assistant Pastor Solomon L. Williams on his 70th birthday on January the 4th, 2013, and as his community service and spiritual leadership in the city of St. Louis. And whereas Pastor Williams began his service as pastor in 1976, and I will give you pastors according to my heart, which shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. That's Jeremiah, the 3rd chapter, the 15th verse. And whereas Pastor Williams is the chairman of the Constitution Committee of the General Assembly of the Church of God in Christ worldwide, and whereas Pastor Williams is a member of the Executive Committee of the General Assembly of the Church of God in Christ worldwide. And whereas Pastor Williams is an administrative assistant to Bishop Wooten, and whereas Pastor Williams is the jurisdictional chairman of the General Assembly of the Eastern Missouri and Western Illinois jurisdiction of the Church of God in Christ under Bishop Wooten. Whereas, due to Pastor Williams' love for the youth of the North St. Louis area, he formed classes with the goal of children advancing from mediocre grades and problematic dispositions to traits of scholarly achievements, garnering grades that they and their parents could be proud of. And whereas Pastor Williams traveled from door to door, serving the residents of the community, offering food, supplies, as well as spiritual assistance, and in addition, providing transportation to those needing it to the various services and meetings of the church. And whereas under the leadership of Pastor Williams, a food bank was successfully operating at New Jerusalem Church of God in Christ at the cathedral, serving food every other week for over 3 years. And whereas Pastor Williams worked side by side with Bishop Lawrence M. Wooten to organize and start charter schools for the North St. Louis area. The charter schools in the area was open for over 6 years, fostering excellence in academics to the youth in the neighborhood. And whereas being a visionary over 25 years ago, Pastor Solomon Williams submitted a proposal to the National Board of the Church of God in Christ Convocation to consider moving the National Holy Convocation from Memphis, Tennessee to other states. Now it has come to fruition. And whereas St. Louis, Missouri is the proud host of the International Church of God in Christ Holy Convocation that brings millions in revenue into the St. Louis economy, and that has a membership of 6.3 million members. And whereas the motto of New Jerusalem Church at the cathedral is a church where love is exemplified and peace prevails. The New Jerusalem at the cathedral's aim for 2013 is growth through loving outreach. Whereas Pastor Williams serves with his wife, Mother May Williams, by his side, along with his family and the New Jerusalem Church at the cathedral family. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that we pause in our deliberations to celebrate the 70th birthday and to recognize the many stalwart achievements of Pastor Solomon Williams. And we wish him continued success, achievement, and accomplishment. And we further direct the clerk of this board to spread a copy of this resolution across the minutes of these proceedings and to prepare a commemorative copy to the end that it may be presented to our honoree at a time and place deemed appropriate by the sponsor. Introduced on the 11th day of January 2013 by Honorable Samuel L. Moore, Alderman of the 4th Ward.
Thank you, Ms. Booker. The Church of God in Christ, also known as COGIC, has grown to one of the largest Pentecostal organizations in the United States and in the world. These two gentlemen, Pastor Solomon Williams and Bishop Wooten, are two of the people that bring this venue that has been in St. Louis for 3 years. We have been here for 3 years, and we leave over $40 to $60 million on the table for the city of St. Louis, one of the largest conventions in the city of St. Louis. We don't get all the recognition, but we are here, and we're here in November every year for the last 3 years. And it's also being threatened that we leave the city of St. Louis and go back to Memphis, Tennessee, where we've been to for for 102 years. This is a 106-year-old organization. And we need all of you out there to make sure that this convention stay in St. Louis. Why would we leave $60 million and let it go to Memphis, Tennessee? Pastor Solomon Williams is one of the major men in this 6.3 million membership organization. And he is one of the guys that helped, along with myself and Bishop Wooten, to bring this convention continuously to the city of St. Louis. So I want to present to you, have Bishop Wooten to introduce Solomon Williams. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Moore. I take great pleasure and honor to introduce this stalwart leader of the community, a family man, a godly man, a leader, a visionary. Let us receive Pastor Solomon L. Williams at this time, pastor of the New Jerusalem Church of God in Christ.
Thank you, Bishop Wooten. To the Honorable President Lewis Reed, and to this honorable caucus of aldermen in this assembly this evening or this morning, I just want to humbly say thank you. This is a surprise, and I'm trying everything to hold back some happy moments of tears. I love St. Louis. I've been here since I was a little boy. My mother brought me here, and she brought me up in the spirit of righteousness. And the only thing I hold for St. Louis, Missouri, is to be continuously the greatest city in the Midwest and leading to the Midwest. I want you to know that New Jerusalem Church of God in Christ at the Cathedral, including myself, my wife, and all of the members, a lot of them are here this morning, and I'm surprised, wondering why they are here. So once again, let me say thank you, and for the time that you've given me in your honorable session on this morning. Honorable Reed, God bless you. And thank you.
Don't go in. Hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second, real quick. Yeah, let me.
Bishop Wooten just won in November. He just made it to the general board, which is 12 men, like the 12 disciples of God, and he's one of the general board members of the Church of God in Christ, 6.3 million people, and he is the 10th man in this organization.
You know, I can't, as a father of four, I cannot thank Bishop Wooten and First Lady Wooten and Pastor Solomon Williams and some of the other members up here on this dais with us today for all that they continue to do within the community all across St. Louis. We are indeed thankful for everything that each and every one of you do. But before I make my comments, I see the Alderwoman from the 19th have stood for some comments. Alderwoman, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. To our most honorable, the Congregation of Church of God in Christ is my second home of church. My father was raised in, and my grandmother was too sincere sometimes, but I know and I understand. But what I want to say to you today is thank you for what you've done for St. Louis on many fronts. And I want to also say that this resolution could only be appropriate if it is in bank, to show that we as an entire body want you, respect you, need you to come back and remain with us with your convention.
Would you like to make the motion?
I make a motion that this resolution.
Been moved by the Alderwoman from the 19th, seconded before she even got it out by the Alderman from the 25th. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, please make note of that change. Prepare another
Please have
copy.
a copy printed before they leave to take with them. We wanted them to see it right away.
Yeah, Madam Clerk, please make note of that change and prepare another copy of the resolution number 2221, prior to the leaving of the bishop and Pastor Solomon Williams?
So noted.
Okay. And there was also a proclamation that I just found out from the mayor's office that will be given to you also prior to you leaving. That's my understanding. But you know, Pastor Williams, can you come up here, please? This resolution, although it was but a piece of paper, it is the highest honor this board has to give. And what it does is that it cements in time some of your many contributions to the citizens of the city of St. Louis to this date and time. So that 100, 200 years from now, when they research the records of the city of St. Louis, they will find that on this day, we thought so much of your contributions that we paused in our deliberations to recognize you for some of those contributions. So 200 years from now, 300 years from now, people, when they research the records of the city of St. Louis, they're going to find buried amongst those records the name Pastor Solomon L. Williams. And they're going to know some of the things that you did to make St. Louis a great city. So like I was saying earlier, as a father of four, I thank you. As the president of the Board of Aldermen, I thank you. As a resident of the city of St. Louis, I thank you. So thank you for all that you've done on behalf of the residents of the city of St. Louis. And God bless you. And I hope you have many more years within the city to continue doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
We have to come on down. Thank you. All right, resolution number 212. Alderwoman Behringer, would you like to approach the dais?
Do it before the commercial so she can come up.
Oh, do it right now. Alderwoman from the 7th.
President, members of the board, I think that having heard the previous resolution and the comments about how important the tourism industry is to our city, I'd like to ask that this resolution be in bank.
Moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, please make note of that change. Prepare another copy of resolution number 212 in bank.
So noted.
You ready? Good morning, Mr. President and members of the board. I am the 16th Ward Alderman Donna Behringer, but I'm also the chair of Convention and Tourism. And part of what I do is I pay close attention to what's going on in Convention and Tourism. And there was a luncheon.
Come in, some order.
There was a luncheon, if you didn't get a chance to attend, in September. And at that luncheon, what we found out was our Convention and Tourism group won an Emmy. This is a real Emmy. I've never held one, much less seen one in real life. So I'm very proud of them because tourism, conventions, is economic development. I learned in college that anytime you go 80 miles outside of your destination, that is new money. Every time we have a convention here, that's new money. New money means good things for the city of St. Louis. And when people come here, they spend their dollars. I'm very proud of what they've been able to do, and I want you all to see the commercial that won the Emmy. It's 30 seconds long, and we will play it for you, so it's very quick, and we have a couple others, because you and I will never see these commercials because they're aired outside of our city. Are we ready, Andre?
You could fly to Venice or Paris or even Copenhagen. You could fly all over the world. But why? When you could just come to St. Louis. Your trip begins at ExploreStLouis.com.
That's it? Okay. At this time, I'm not going to read the resolution, the whereas, but I am going to ask the people who make our city so popular for our out-of-town guests to come up and say a few words. I have Kitty Radcliffe, who's the head of the St. Louis Convention Visitors Commission, and I also have the person who's in charge of marketing, who does help putting these commercials together, Brian Hall, so that they can say a few words on their behalf.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderwoman Behringer. Thank you, Alderwoman Young. And thank you, President Reed, for the opportunity to be here with you this morning. I promise not to make a speech. I just really want to say thank you. The first television commercial that you saw is the Emmy Award-winning commercial. The others are some of the commercials that we have, all created by our Chief Marketing Officer, Brian Hall. We have others that we didn't show you, but they run in Chicago, they run in Indianapolis, Kansas City, Memphis, many other cities that are primary markets for us in trying to attract visitors to our community. And that's the St. Louis that people see, because that's the St. Louis that we live in. And we're very fortunate not only to live in a wonderful place, but to have such wonderful assets that are great for visitors to our community. So by attracting these visitors to our community, we support a lot of jobs in the St. Louis region. And it's an 80,000 person workforce in the region in all of the tourism industries, and they're affected by the leisure travel greatly that's generated by the interest that's generated by these commercials when they run in those markets. Also impacted tremendously by conventions that we bring into the community, including the last one that was just recognized, which our sales team put together, the Church of God in Christ, and is a tremendous asset to have in this region in November. America Center sits in Phyllis Young's ward, but many of the other assets of our tourism product are in wards throughout the entire city, whether that's hotels, restaurants, visitor attractions, transportation companies, you name it. All of those companies benefit by visitors coming to our community and spending a lot of money and going back home. So I thank you very much for this recognition. It's wonderful to have the chance to show you those commercials, which we can't afford to run in our own market because we're not going to spend the money, but we're going to spend the money in other markets attracting people to the community. And so it was nice to have a chance to show those to you this morning. Thank you all very much.
I'd just like to add my accommodations to this award, because Kitty and Brian are very professional. I've worked with them for many years, and the job they're doing is phenomenal because, as she said, 80,000 people work in this industry, and those people are living in your ward and my ward and providing salaries and living for people to support their families. So it's a critical industry for our community, and I appreciate the hard work that everyone is doing to make it successful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kitty and Brian, I also want to just thank you for all the work that you've done and continue to do at the Convention Center, selling the city. You guys are doing a magnificent job there. Yeah, I'm sure you guys praise your team a lot, and I've heard you praise your team a lot also. But a team is nothing without great leadership. So thank you for the tremendous leadership you continue to show at the Convention Center.
Thank you very much.
Oh, we are? Oh, great. We're going to redo the resolution.
Brian, you should hold this.
Alderman from the 20th.
That's fine. Mr. President, I just wanted to mention that for the last few years, I've been a real fan of these commercials, and I understand the monetary constraints in terms of not doing that locally, but I would challenge, hopefully, some of the media who are here to, every time we get some of the sordid underbelly of what just represents this community only a little bit, that perhaps we should give some equal time to the rest of the equation of what is truly the city. And I know, because they've done this for me, that anybody here who wants a copy of those to distribute to other folks, to put out when you're giving information, you can send it as an attachment to one of your emails. We are truly the ambassadors for this community, and a lot of times, because we know all the great stuff, we forget about it. But these commercials just sort of bring that out, and they're very powerful. So thank you very much. And finally, with the Emmy, maybe people will recognize all that great work finally.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 24th.
Well, I'd just like to congratulate both Ms. Ratcliffe and Mr. Hall and say I think there's a lot of good forward-thinking ideas coming out of the CVC right now, and just encourage them to keep up the great work they've been doing. Thanks.
Been moved and seconded. We adopt our courtesy resolution calendar. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries. That return to our regular order of business. Introduction of honored guests. Any introductions? Alderman from 12th.
Mr. President, members of the board, good morning. Welcome back to the new legislative session. First and foremost, a couple guests I want to introduce. is our new treasurer, Ms. Tashara Jones. Ms. Jones, I think we all look forward to working with you, and you'll do a great job over there, so I just wanted to tell you that this morning. I also want to introduce Ms. Joanne Williams, Scott Burns, and our choral worker, Brian, from the Carpenters District Council. And also we have with us my former state rep, Jake Hummel, and Sarah Martin. I just want to introduce them as my guests.
Alderman from 20th.
Mr. President, members of the board, it's indeed my pleasure today to introduce as a special guest someone who is a true friend of the Gravois Park neighborhood. She successfully this week prosecuted an armed robbery case involving actually 2 armed robberies by the same person, one in the 18th Ward in Kings Highway East and another one in Wells Goodfellow in the 22nd Ward. She's representing the Circuit Attorney's Office today, Jennifer Joyce's office, Ms. Tanya Engelhardt.
Alderman from 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've got a couple of guests to recognize this morning. Mr. Andrew Weil from the St. Louis Landmarks Association. Rhonda Smythe from TrailNet. Oh, there she is. And new St. Louis University intern extraordinaire, Luke Sappa, on his first day here.
Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have for my honored guest today and many times Ronnie Auer, who's hiding in the leisure room.
Alderman from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to introduce 2 choral fellows that are with us this morning, Bram Sable-Smith and Megan Gendusa, who is also with the Painters Council. Also, as my special guest, I'd like to have Peter Sortino of Washington University and Susan Troutland from Great Rivers Greenway.
Let's let the lady go first, guys. Alderman from the 14th. Okay. They've been up for a minute.
I would like to introduce Gary Otten from the Painters District Council number 2 as my special guest. Thank you, President Reed.
Alderman from 3rd. Yeah.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to introduce as my special guest one of the best comptrollers that the city ever had since in its conception, Verbus Jones. Also, I'd like to introduce Tashara, the first female treasurer of the city of St. Louis, and I know she's going to do a beautiful job, Tashara Jones.
Alderman from the 23rd.
Yes, I'd like to have as my guest today Al from the firefighters and Steve from the communication workers, and sitting in the back, Celeste Reeder from the realtors.
Alderman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have as my special guest today Damon Jones, committee man of the 6th Ward. Thank you.
Alderman from the 25th.
Thank you, Mr. President. This morning I would like to welcome John Payne from Show Me Cannabis, Rhonda Smythe from TrailNet, Sarah Wood Martin, and my state representative, Jake Hummel, as my special guest this morning.
Alderman from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I have a 16th Ward resident here today who is also our Circuit Clerk Jane Schweitzer's daughter. Anna Schweitzer is my guest today.
Any further introductions? Alderman from the 18th.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to introduce today representatives from JetLinks, which is a new private airline service that's coming into the airport here in the city of St. Louis. We have their representatives, Mr. Jim Mosey, somewhere. We have also from JetLinks, Keith Harbinson and Bob Herman.
Alderman from the 22nd.
Members of the board, I'd like to have as my honored guest this morning, Miss Melissa Bodie, with one of the finest non-for-profit agencies in the city, Big Brothers and Big Sisters, and she's hiding up in the gallery.
There you go. Alderman from 22nd, also thanks for all your work with Big Brothers and Big Sisters. I know you spend a lot of time with them, and I thank you for that. Alderman from 26.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to have as my special guest today the 84th District State Rep, Ms. Carla May. I also want to recognize and congratulate two gentlemen whose birthday will be on January the 13th. My roommate, Alderman Varmer, and also Jeffrey Boyd, and a birthday that I share with a longtime friend and an alderman, Mr. Arnowitz, and that'll be on January 2nd. And I want to say happy birthday also to Vervis Jones. Thank you.
Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I'd like to have today as my special guest, as always, the AT&T family, Ameren, Missouri, and all those of you who have not been introduced. You are my special guest.
Alderman from the 27th.
Yes? Okay.
They
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I would like to introduce my 27th Ward residents, the Cromwells, and have them as my special guests. Thanks.
Any further introductions? Any further introductions? Alderman from the 10th, like to wrap us up?
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, as we gather here to start the month of January off 11 days late, January 11th is a famous holiday. Actually, it is a day of mourning. On this day in 1973, the designated hitter rule was adopted by Major League Baseball, ruining the game we all love. But more importantly, as my special guest, I have the one, the only, the illustrious, the man in pinstripes, Mr. Gary Best, Director of Parks for the City of St. Louis.
Alderman from 13, you recognize on approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to approve the minutes of the November 30th meeting.
Moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 11th and the 12th. I'll take the 11th this time. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in sections A, B, and C of the agenda and have been placed in all aldermen's mailboxes. I have from His Honor the Mayor the following correspondence. Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the St. Louis Art Museum Sub-District. The appointment of Judith Levy, who resides at 4545 Lindell Boulevard, whose term will expire on December 31st, 2016. The appointment of Dr. Donald Suggs, who resides at 4545 Lindell Boulevard, whose term will expire on December 31st, 2014. I respectfully request your approval of these appointments. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the St. Louis Art Museum Sub-District.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I move that we accept the mayor's appointments.
It's moved by the Alderman from the 17th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries.
That's the report of city officials.
We dispense with line item 7. Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? Alderman from the 13th, you're recognized.
Yes, Mr. President, we need to approve some more minutes. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of December 7th and 14th meetings.
Well, hold on for a second. Hold on 1 second. We've already approved minutes. What did you say?
We approved. The first motion was to approve the minutes from the November 30th meeting, which we approved December 14th.
Oh, so they just have a misprint on the.
No, I made a misprint.
Oh, you made. Oh,
Yeah.
you made a misstatement. Okay, I'm with you now. All right, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 13th. I entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 23rd. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries. All right. Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? We dispense with line items 8 through 10. First reading of board bills.
Board Bill 261, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance recommended by the Airport Commission and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, repealing certain ordinances pertaining to the regulation of schedule of fees and charges for ground transportation operators, containing a severability and an emergency clause. Board Bill 262, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance authorizing and directing the issuance by the city of its airport revenue refunding bonds, Series 2013, for Lambert Airport in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $37,500,000, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 263, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commission, the Comptroller, and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, making certain findings with respect to the transfer of up to $13,727,769 of excess monies that the city intends to transfer from the Debt Service Stabilization Fund to the Airport Revenue Fund, containing a severability and an emergency clause. Board Bill 264, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller to enter into and execute on behalf of the city lease agreement between the city and JetLink St. Louis, containing a severability and an emergency clause. Board Bill 265, sponsored by Alderman Troop, an ordinance authorizing and directing the street commissioner to take all necessary actions to honorarily designate the 1500 block of North Union as Bishop Lawrence M. Wooten Boulevard. Board Bill 266, sponsored by Alderman Conway, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 4274 Flad, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 267, sponsored by Alderwoman Howard, an ordinance approving a redevelopment plan for 4954 Chippewa. Board Bill 268, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2325 and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 269, sponsored by Alderman Conway, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 4136 through 38 Flad, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 270, sponsored by Alderwoman Hubbard, an ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller of the city to execute a quitclaim deed to KLR KATO LLC for certain city-owned property located in City Block 564 East, which property is known as 1211 North Tucker, upon receipt of and in consideration the sum of $200,000 and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 271, sponsored by Alderman Conway, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 4251 through 53 Russell, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 272, sponsored by Alderman Ortman, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 21 through 23 South 11th Street, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 273, sponsored by Alderman Moore, an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to change the zoning of property from C, multiple family dwelling district, to G, local commercial and office district for 1523, 1525, and 1529 Bacon, containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 274, sponsored by Alderman Cone, an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission pertaining to zoning code containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 275, sponsored by Alderman Ogilvy, Arnowitz, Young, and Cone, Arnowitz, Young, and Ogilvy, an ordinance making it unlawful to possess marijuana, providing an exception for lawfully prescribed medical marijuana, containing a severability clause and a penalty clause. Board Bill 276, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, and ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller to enter into and execute on behalf of the city the Lambert Airport Lease Agreement, AL 230, between the city and the Cleve Venture Corporation, containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. Board Bill 277, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller to enter into and execute modification number 4 to the Lambert Airport land lease between the city and United States of America, containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 278, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance pertaining to 4100 through 4300 Lindell Historic District and providing new standards for the 4100 through 4300 Lindell Historic District. Board Bill 279, sponsored by Alderwoman Florida, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3530 Utah containing a severability clause. Board Bill 280, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance designating a portion of the city as a redevelopment area known as the St. Louis Innovation District redevelopment area containing a severability clause. Board Bill 281, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance affirming adoption of a redevelopment plan, redevelopment area, and redevelopment project between the city and St. Louis Innovation District containing a severability clause. Board Bill 282, sponsored by Alderwoman Hubbard, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2707 Rauschenbach containing a severability clause. Board Bill 283, sponsored by Alderwoman Cruzen, Alderman Kennedy, Williamson, and Rhodey, an ordinance pertaining to the Central West End Historic District, having its subject matter of the boundary and regulations for standards for the Central West End Historic District and providing new standards for the Central West End Historic District. That's the extent of our first readings.
Reference to committee.
To the Public Safety Committee, Board Bills 275 and 283. To the Ways and Means Committee, Board Bill 270. To the Streets Committee, Board Bill 265. To the Housing Committee, Board Bills 273, 274, 278, 280, and 281. To the Transportation and Commerce Committee, Board Bills 261, 262, 263, 264, 276, and 277. And to the Neighborhood Development Committee, Board Bills 266, 267, 268, 269, 271, 272, 279, and 282. That's the extent of reference to committees.
Madam Clerk, please assign Board Bill number 275 to Health.
So noted.
We'll dispense with line items 13 and 14, perfection consent.
Board Bill 235, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to change the zoning of property from C, multiple family dwelling district, to the F, neighborhood commercial district in City Block 4837 for properties on Enright containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 195, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller to enter into and execute a First Amendment to the East Terminal Agency Agreement to the Lambert Airport East Terminal Agency Agreement between the city and the airport terminal services containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. Board Bill 196, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, and ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller to enter into and execute a service agreement for solid waste disposal and recycling services at Lambert Airport with a 5-year term between the city and Allied Services, LLC, containing a severability and an emergency clause. Board Bill 197, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commission, the Board of Public Service, and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, establishing and authorizing a public works improvement program at Lambert Airport at an estimated cost of $4,250,000, authorizing an initial appropriation in the total amount of $4,250,000 from the Airport Development Fund containing a severability and an emergency clause. Board Bill 257, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commission, the Board of Public Service, and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Comptroller, the City Councilor, and the Director of Airports to enter into and execute and deliver a settlement agreement between the city and the city owner and operator of Lambert Airport and American Airlines, providing for a comprehensive resolution of all matters and controversies which are part of Americans Chapter 11 reorganization case and proceedings, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 236, sponsored by Alderwoman Florida, an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to change the zoning of property from B, two-family dwelling district and H, area commercial district, to the H, area commercial district only in City Block 1495 for properties on Utah and McLean containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 251, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance designating a portion of the city as a redevelopment area known as the Northeast Hampton Berthold Redevelopment Area, establishing the Northeast Hampton Berthold Special Allocation Fund, authorizing certain actions by the city officials, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 252, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance affirming adoption of a redevelopment plan, redevelopment area, and redevelopment project, authorizing the execution of a redevelopment agreement between the city and TriStar Imports Incorporating, designating TriStar Imports Incorporating as the developer of the redevelopment area and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 97, sponsored by Alderman Williamson, an ordinance enacting a curfew for Marie Fowler Park and Philip J. Lucier Park, containing a exception for persons holding permits and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 233, sponsored by Alderwoman Flowers, an ordinance establishing a four-way stop site at the intersection of Logan Street and Lowell Street by regulating all eastbound and westbound traffic traveling on Logan Street at Lowell Street and regulating all northbound and southbound traffic traveling on Lowell Street at Logan Street and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 259, sponsored by Alderwoman Flowers, an ordinance recommended by the Port Authority Commission, repealing Ordinance 68909, which authorized an option to lease agreement and a lease agreement between the city and Grace Hill Settlement House, and enacting a new ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller to enter into a lease agreement between the city and Great Rivers Greenway for certain land on the unimproved wharf. Board Bill 247, sponsored by Alderman Ortman, an ordinance establishing a four-way stop site at the intersection of McNair and Victor by regulating all north-south traffic traveling on McNair approaching such intersection containing an emergency clause. That's the extent of perfection consent.
Alderman from 13, you recognize on the motion for the perfection consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I move for perfection of the aforementioned bills on the consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from 13th, seconded by the Alderman from 11th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman from 18th, you recognize.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I move to suspend the rules in order to move Board Bills 195, 196, 197, and Board Bill 257 to the third reading consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Troop, Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderwoman Young, Alderman Conway, Alderman Ortman, Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Villa, Alderman Arnowitz, Alderman Wessels, Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Florida, Alderwoman Behringer, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Schmid, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Ogilvie, Alderman Cone, Alderman Williamson, Alderman Carter, Alderwoman Cruzen, President Reed, Alderman Conway, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, 27 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 18th and place the aforementioned board bills on the third reading consent calendar. Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill 258, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, Alderman Bosley Conway, Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Florida, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Carter, and Alderwoman Cruzen, and President Reed. An ordinance relating to parks, subject to the approval of the voters, an additional 3/16 of 1 cent sales tax on all retail sales made, containing an interpretation clause, a severability clause, and an emergency clause.
Alderman from the 7th, you recognize on the perfection of Board Bill number 258.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I move for perfection of Board Bill 258.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 15th. Alderman from the 7th, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. This is the bill that would allow a vote by the people to impose a 3/16 sales tax that would then be used for a program called Safe and Accessible Arch and Public Parks Initiative. It was authorized by the state so that we could do this. It would be operated or collected and used by Great Rivers Greenway would be the fiduciary body for this. The state legislation calls for an annual audit, and after the committee hearing, which was quite extensive about how this would operate, one of the things that came up and has been dealt with in the interim period is that there would be established, as there always are for Great River Greenways projects, a Citizens Advisory Committee. That would be made up of 30 people who would then review plans for construction, also look over the bids and determine the priorities on projects. That would then be approved by the board for Great Rivers Greenway. So there would be citizen input. That would be, the board would be established, as it has been on other projects, by an open call for people who would be interested in participating on this panel. And what would happen with the finances, that we've been hearing this week that St. Charles County is unlikely to be a part of it. So it's between St. Louis City and St. Louis County. It has to be passed in both municipalities in order to be able to be collected. If it should be passed, that would provide a little bit more than $31 million annually. That would be divided up so that 30% would go to the project to make the arch a better place for a visitor's experience there. It would also then provide 30% or $9.4 million each year to Great Rivers Greenway. And Great Rivers Greenway, as you all know, but just to clarify for the public, is the entity that is being charged with providing trails, bike trails, pedestrian trails, enhancing the outdoor recreation experience for people in our region. And one of the priorities for their future would be improving the access on the riverfront trail, finishing the trestle. If you drive up 70 North, you see that they've painted the trestle saying it's Great Rivers Greenway, so that those would be new recreational opportunities for those of us who are living in the city. Another of them would be then that 40% would go to our parks. Our major parks, Carondelet, Fairgrounds, Forest Park, O'Fallon Park, Targrove Park, and Wilmore Park would all receive revenues on an annual basis from this tax. In addition to that, those of us who don't have big parks in our neighborhood would be able to benefit from the Neighborhood Parks Capital Improvement Account, which would be enhanced with this tax revenue. So basically, what the bill before us today does is it prescribes the ballot language that would go on the April ballot. It prescribes the formulation for how the monies would be spent. It includes a cooperation agreement to ensure that it's a comprehensive and coordinated development of the area, and it includes an emergency clause. This tax would not be applied to the sale of food or prescription drugs. So that should make it a better tax for those people who are less capable of paying it. It's subject, as I said, to an independent public audit, and it requires Great Rivers Greenway to adopt a capital improvement plan, and they did that at their December meeting. This tax would expire after 20 years unless the public decided that they would like to extend it. So with that, I renew my motion.
All right. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kind of has pained me the last couple of months to be a critic of some components of this plan, because Great Rivers Greenway does good work. I was at a neighborhood meeting one time where I described the 1/10 of a cent sales tax that Great Rivers Greenway gets as my favorite sales tax that I pay. And so I wish that we were here talking about just expanding Great Rivers Greenway's sales tax, because that's something I would be happy to support. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about expanding Great Rivers Greenway's role, a tax that goes to support a national park, which we don't own, and a tax increase for our local parks. There's a lot going on. I think the important thing for a lot of my colleagues to know, I think also especially important for the media to understand, for the press to understand, if this passes, is that we're really not debating today the difference between having a project and having no project. That is not the debate. Part of this project is already funded without a tax increase. There is already $70 million ready to go for the project, and that money will be spent whether this tax is ultimately approved by the voters or not. Now, where did that money come from? It's a MoDOT project. It's a federal Tiger grant. It's at least $18 commitment from Great Rivers Greenway for out of their current revenue. What are we gonna get for that roughly $70 million? The park over the highway, the lid, which has been something people have been trying to complete for a long time, is funded now. So that's gonna happen, tax or no tax. And I think, that's a critical component for the media to understand as they report on this, is that that's already happening. Lenore K. Sullivan, Great Rivers Greenway has already committed $18 million to rebuilding Lenore K. Sullivan, which is a component of the project I fully support. Lenore K. Sullivan is in bad shape. A rebuilt Lenore K. Sullivan will absolutely be a great connection between the current Riverfront Trail and a future south expansion of the Riverfront Trail. That's a great project. We're also getting a bunch of road and ramp work in the downtown area from MoDOT. So there's a lot of stuff already happening. Excuse me. If we just did this $70 million project, I really feel like the proponents of this project, when this is finished in 2 years, could point to it and say, we did a great project. We did the type of project that we've been looking to do for a long time, for a number of years. And we completed it, and they could be proud of the work they've done. It would definitely solve some problems that have been recognized in and around the Arch grounds for a long time. And City Arch River, the group that has spearheaded that effort over the last several years, absolutely deserves credit for getting us to that point, for coordinating the $70 million. And now as they go into a fundraising phase, that $70 million could easily be 70, 80, 90, 100. They plan on raising, they say, maybe up to $200 million. So it's important to understand it's not all or nothing. It's the choice between the silver project and the platinum project. That's the choice we're making. If you think the silver project is good enough, you could vote against this and not feel like you're saying no progress. But the platinum project was designed, I think, without really a budget in mind, without a distinct means to pay for it. That design process took several years. There was a competition, and the result we have today is something that is just expensive. I think by any analysis, it's a costly project. Something like $300+ million of that project will, if the tax were to pass, would definitely be a publicly funded project. And then City Arch River is going to make their best effort to raise another $200 million. But I think we ought to take a close look at that. I've made many times now the comparison between Forest Park Forever and City Arch River. These are both private fundraising and management organizations that are working in kind of marquee parks in St. Louis. Everybody agrees that Forest Park Forever has done a very good job over the last 25 years assisting the city of St. Louis in funding all of the improvements to Forest Park. But all the money they've raised over 25 years is not $200 million. They have not raised $200 million in 25 years. It's about, I don't know the exact figure, but I think it's about $150, $155 million they've raised in a big, the region's marquee park. I think a park that has a higher profile than the Arch Grounds. Now, City Arch River is going to endeavor to raise $200 million for the Arch Grounds. And I know that those are very capable people there, but I still think that is a very tall order to raise $200 million for this project. And I'm not casting doubt on whether they can do that. I'm just saying we ought to recognize what a steep hill that's going to be for them to climb. And so we got to recognize that the public money is leading the charge. We're putting all this public money out there first. And we are hoping that the private money is going to follow. And I hope it does follow, but I think we have to acknowledge it's not a certainty that it will follow. How do we go, question is, how do we go from this $70 or $80 million project that is already funded to a $500 million project? What happens, what is the next $400 million for? And I think we need to apply some scrutiny there. Is that next $400 million a critical expense, a necessary expense for the taxpayers of the city of St. Louis to make? And I think there are some real questions about some of those components. I'm not going to talk about all the components, but I think the most important one to highlight is the garage at the north end of the Arch Grounds. That garage is a little bit less, I believe, than 30 years old. Metro owns the garage. It's obviously a taxpayer financed garage. That garage is basically the only thing in Metro's portfolio that earns them a profit every year. It's the only thing that Metro does that's not subsidized by the taxpayers. And so what the Great Rivers Greenway and City Arch River plan does, part of the plan is removing that garage. And if you look at if you look at the capital improvement agreement here, they're going to spend something like $18 or $19 million to remove the garage and then rebuild the area where the garage was. Is something like that a critical thing for us to fund? To me, that seems like something that is a want, but not a need. And I think if we went around and we sort of polled all my colleagues here, I think a lot of people would say there are more critical quality of life needs than tearing down a young, profitable garage at the Arch Grounds. And so that's why I think we really need to take a close look at some of the stuff in the bill. Does the project have to be this big? Does it have to be a $500 million project? Can we be happy and successful with a $150 million project? I personally believe we can be. And what that would do is it would leave that tax money that we don't spend at the Arch Grounds for other things that we might think are important. But once we approve this, I mean, the cat is out of the bag, the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's not going back. This will be fixed for 20 years, and in 20 years we'll have to potentially renew it. My colleague from the 21st Ward during the committee hearing, I think very astutely pointed out and I've just committed the same sin, is that all of the conversation has been about the arch grounds component of the tax. But that is only 30%. There has been almost nothing said about the lion's share of this tax, the other 70% of the tax, which is something between city and county is going to be something like $500 million for the rest of the tax. We haven't heard what the priorities for that $500 million are. We know where it goes. It goes to GRG, and it goes to the St. Louis County and city park systems. But I haven't seen a single list of, here are our top priorities for this $500 million. I think that is a real concern going forward. I suppose we could make some guesses as to what those priorities are, but when you're talking about 500 million new tax dollars over 20 years, you'd think you'd want to take a look at that ahead of time. Maybe, maybe finally, I know these regional initiatives are hard. I know it is very complicated to get city and the two counties to do something together. It's a big challenge. But unfortunately, it looks like St. Charles County is pulling back. It's still possible that they'll get this on the ballot for the April election, but it's increasingly unlikely. If they haven't even, St. Charles County has not even introduced this bill yet. And if it's not passed in the next 11 days, it's not going to be on the ballot in April. They haven't identified who would pay for the election. The bill does not have a sponsor. So it's a less regional initiative than it was initially sold as. It's now down to city and county. The city and the county are already doing some things that benefit tourists, benefit people from St. Charles. We got the Zoo Museum taxing district. This would be kind of like that, where we pay for something that is largely used not by our residents, but by tourists or people from farther out in the metro area. The proponents of this have frequently sold it as 2 cents on every $10 purchase, which is true. It's 2 cents on every $10 purchase. It's also something like $50 or $60 for an average household every year. It's all kind of in how you present the numbers. Do we feel that $50 or $60 from an average St. Louis household is, in new money, that this is the top priority? I don't know, especially when you consider that $50 or $60, it's not aimed at necessarily improving the quality of life for most of those people. It's aimed at improving the tourism experience for people visiting St. Louis. We're doing the same thing with the ZMD, and it's getting worse. Every year, we pay for more visitors to use these institutions for free. And, the arch is great. It's a wonderful symbol for St. Louis, but it's hardly a silver bullet that will lead to a successful city. Since we built the arch, 500,000 people have left the city of St. Louis. We lost 60% of our population since we built the arch. Since we enacted the Zoo Museum taxing district, the city and county have both lost population. I'm not saying it's because we did those things, but I'm saying that these things are hardly assured of creating a better quality of life for the people who are paying for them. So, my recommendation is City of St. Louis is already paying higher taxes than St. Charles. Paying the earnings tax, paying higher residential property taxes, paying higher commercial property taxes. We're paying a higher sales tax. In some cases, we're already paying 3% more than people in St. Charles. And at some point, that disparity gets too large. And I think we are getting dangerously close to the point where that disparity is too big. And if we're going to raise new tax dollars in St. Louis, new taxes, I think the priority needs to be spending those new tax dollars on quality of life issues for the people who pay those taxes. So just to conclude, I want to go back to this idea that this is really not an all or nothing situation. We have a project already paid for, partially locally funded, partially state funded, partially federally funded, that we can be happy with and proud of, that solves the major problems people have identified, and we can do that without increasing everybody's taxes. And I just hope my colleagues will consider those items when they vote on this. Thank you.
Alderman from 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor on the bill. To me, it's pretty simple. It's a choice of the people. I mean, what we're voting for today is to put it on the ballot in April. And then our voters, I've always said, are very intelligent. They're going to do the homework, and I'm sure that they'll make the right choice. So, but I definitely support putting this legislation on the ballot in April. Thank you.
Thanks. Alderman from the 3rd.
Mr. President and members of the board, I've said this many, many times here, but it just not seemed to get across. The city of St. Louis is the only city in the world that's a county within itself. Anywhere in St. Louis County, those municipalities get help from the county seat. What the city of St. Louis does is for the city, and we don't get help from anywhere else. So we must maintain our parks. We're the only ones that are capable of doing that. Nobody else is going to give us a nickel. The parks have a great role to play in the value of our properties. So therefore, to help our parks, therefore to make them viable, therefore to make them more valuable to people. You look at Forest Park. People from all over the region come to Forest Park. People from all over the area will soon be coming to Fairgrounds Park, because we're going to put some stuff in there that's like a go-kart racetrack. Long time ago, back in the turn of the 19th century, that used to be places where you'd have the World's Fair. That used to be where people would come down for horse races over there. But all of that has changed. We must maintain our parks. We must be able to put them in a position and a condition that's going to bring people in. Because after all, when you look at property values, all of those properties along Lindell Avenue, after you get to Kings Highway, the value is up. Why? Because you got that Forest Park sitting over there. And that Forest Park draws people from all over the region to come here. And it makes sense to put money into what it is that makes our value of our properties stay the same or increase. Now, there's no other money going to come from any place else. It has to come from us. Those parks make a difference in our communities. And so therefore, it makes sense to invest some money in them, because those things help maintain the property value, and it also enhances the property value of our own homes where we live. I know it hurts us. I don't like to spend extra taxes either. I could use that money myself. But when you look at what it does for our community, it makes sense. Anything that has value to it, that enhances the value of what it is that we invest in, what we own, what we do. That's what we work for. That's why you're in this city, because you want a sanitary, safe, and decent place for your children to live in, to raise your family in, where you're going to have some stability. Those parks add to the stability of our neighborhoods. And I understand, I don't want to spend no extra money either. I wish I could have all the tax money that I spend. But then look at what we would be losing. You must have it. They're necessary. They're an important part of our community. They're an important part of our life, whether you go or not to the park. There are an awful lot of people that do go and utilize that park. When I look at fairgrounds, I see children from 6 years old on up till they finish high school over there playing baseball, playing football in that park. If that park wasn't in good enough shape to attract them, where would they go? We need to increase the value of our parks, and the only way you're going to do that, you got to put some money into these parks. And there's nothing wrong with it. I don't want to spend no extra tax dollars either. But you must take care of it. You must maintain it. You must support it. And if you don't, the property values all over the area are going to begin to fall. And because this is where we chose to be, not where we have to be, it makes only sense to take care of what it is at home. Charity begins at home, and then it spreads abroad. So I don't want to pay any more taxes either, but it's a necessary part of the stability of our neighborhoods in order to be able to do that. So I support it. In fact, I'm a co-sponsor on it. And like I said, I don't want to spend any more money than anybody else, but I'm not going to cut my nose off to spite my face.
Other one from 19.
President and members of the board, I stand and rise in support of this bill. It's pretty simple. You know, you always want to talk about what you shouldn't do, what you can't do, but one of the things we cannot do is continue to be stagnant in this city without improving all of our infrastructure. And it's so interesting because at a neighborhood meeting the other night, a gentleman asked the question, how much money had been spent in our infrastructure, on our infrastructure in the city of St. Louis? And when you go back and you look at it and try to equate that, we know it hasn't been enough. We know that in order for our property values to rise, to be a city that is somewhat significant in its ability to provide services to its residents and to businesses, our infrastructure is not where it needs to be. We're simply talking about the parks today. That's a strong part of that. But we have many other things to talk about. Now, no one wants to raise their real estate tax. No one wants to pay any additional personal property tax. Nobody wants to pay for anything, but you want to live here. And you want to point your finger and say, I want better services, I want better everything. So I say to everyone that we're going to be responsible because we are here in this city. Most of us absolutely love this city. It has so much to offer. And we could become a viable community that becomes entrepreneurial if we improve those things, the assets that we have. And so that would mean more jobs because of the improvements that are going to take place. It would mean more jobs because hopefully as we continue to work with Great Rivers Trailway and all the other things, we'll have small entrepreneurs with different kinds of little kiosks and things, selling things. I want it to be like some of the other places that I visit, Alexandria, Virginia, Columbus, Ohio, Baltimore, Maryland, all these places. We are within 4-hour driving distance of so many people who like to vacation in cities like St. Louis. So let's just continue to talk about how we can improve it. Another conversation last night I was in, we were talking about our riverfront. And we need to talk about the riverfront on the St. Louis side and the East St. Louis side. If we had been more entrepreneurial and thought it out 25 years ago and really started somewhere. See, we're starting, and that's the point I don't think anybody gets. You never stop once you start, and you look for money in many different places as you continue to move forward. If we had started this and been serious about it, we could truly be a destination point. There's no reason why our riverfront shouldn't be providing us with more income. So I don't want us to get caught up on what somebody else is not doing or anything else, because we already know the sponsor of the bill said St. Charles will not be playing in this game. Fine. But St. Louis County and St. Louis City are truly one of the largest economic engines in the state of Missouri. And if we're going to work together and move this forward, we're at a great start. And I hope we can continue this process as we look at other things that need to be done in the city. And we don't have to hit everybody with a big bill. That's not what we're trying to do. So if all of us have a small share in it, then we can get some things accomplished. Residents of the city of St. Louis know and understand sometimes better than we do. Because you know, I have conversations on a regular basis in my community. I never try to hide anything that I'm sponsoring. I always try to answer the questions as best I can. If I don't know the answer, I'm coming back with it. But if you continue to educate people and they want to be a part of this community and they want to see it improve, then we need to be responsible stewards down here and be a part of opportunities to improve this city. So what I'm asking us to do is to actually take the time, be responsible, and educate the community so that they can make a good decision on behalf of the whole, not just my selfish pocketbook, but on behalf of the whole. Thank you, Mr. President.
Alderman from 28th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Mr. President, I'd like to ask if the alderman from the 24th would yield.
Alderman from 24th, will you yield for questioning to the Alderman from 28th?
Certainly.
Alderman from 28th, please proceed.
Thank you. If I heard you correctly, Alderman, I think what you were saying is that we've got a $70 million project in hand, which is the lid over the Memorial Drive and the highway there, and that we ought to just go with that. Is that kind of what is that one of the points?
It's the lid over the highway. It's the removal of Memorial Drive.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I don't know if
Sorry. It's the lid over the highway. It's the removal of Memorial Drive. It's GRG's $18 million commitment to Lenore K. Sullivan, existing $18 million commitment. It's a lot of MoDOT paid for road and ramp work around the lid.
So I believe that your point is, well, let's just do that and not move on to the more Cadillac or BMW, whatever we're going to call it, project. Is that correct?
Let's call it the Mercedes project in honor of another bill on the
All right, thank you.
calendar today.
And I think the other thing that I heard you said a lot of things, but one of the other major points was that you were wondering if any of the private dollars would really be raised. Or if $200 million of the private dollars would really be raised.
Yeah, and let me...
Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, the way we did this in Forest Park was we did it
I actually know how they did it.
I know you know. We did it sort of one step at a time. Well, one step at a time. It's been a 20-year process to build all that stuff. And Forest Park Forever has raised some money. There's been some tax money. They build a few things, and then they say, look at the good work we've done. Now we want to build the next thing. Generous donors in the community help us out. What we're doing.
So the question is, will those donors be able to raise, your question is, will those donors really be able to raise that money? At least I think that's what I heard. And I guess let me just respond to those two things, because those sounded like two major points here. One is, I don't think a $70 million project, the lid over the river, lid over the highway and the road kind of projects, I don't think that is good enough. And I think that when we start thinking small like that is good enough, we are aspiring to mediocrity, which is not what I aspire to. I aspire to let's have the absolute best thing that we can here on the riverfront and as a destination for our city. And we know the arch is wonderful. It's going to be 50 years old, I think it is, here shortly, but it is not connected to downtown in any way. And I think that aspiring to just do a little bit is not where I would want to head. I want to aspire to do the whole thing. It's a $380 million project, I think, that is actually planned. Most of and by the way, it shouldn't be lost on us that project is happening in the city of St. Louis, which we will be paying the citizens of the city of St. Louis, would be paying a very small part of that. And so I mean, it's because, of course, the Arch is in the city of St. Louis, but I think that aspiring to something that is mediocre is what causes and what has caused over many years some of our population loss. So I think we ought to aspire to the whole thing, to the big project, and put together the money to do that. I don't think it is good enough just to build the lid over the road and the related stuff. To the second point, you know, aspiring to raise $200 million is a very major undertaking. But the folks that are behind this are committed to doing it. I don't make the assumption that they can't do this. I make the assumption that they can do this to the positive, and that they will do this. I mean, our community is a very generous community, and all you have to do is look at the money that has been raised in Forest Park, or look at the money that is raised by our colleges and our universities, and you know, many of them have fundraising drives that are much bigger than this, or our art museum, or our, you know, we could go down the list. So I am going to bet on these folks that are behind this project, and am confident that they will figure out how to raise these funds. And, you know, if I was putting money down on the table, I wouldn't be betting against this one. I'd be betting in favor of it. So for that reason also, I think the private money will be there, and this will be funded and accomplished by this group of citizens that are behind this. You know, I think St. Louis deserves the big project. I mean, we don't just deserve the lid. I think we ought to do better than that. And who is going to benefit the most when more visitors come to St. Louis? And we just gave the CVC resolution this morning. And when more folks come, there's going to be more occupancy in our hotel rooms. Many of them will be downtown. I'm sure not everybody's going to stay downtown, but a lot of people will, because there are a lot of hotel rooms there. More people will eat in the restaurants. More people will spend the money, and there'll be sales tax that'll be generated from that. And I think that, you know, the economic development as a result of really having, you know, a national landmark here that is connected to our downtown. Right now, you know, we say the Arch is in downtown, and it is kinda, but it sure is hard to get there if you're gonna walk there. So for that reason, I think we ought to aspire to the big project. 3/16 of a cent sales tax is 2 cents on a $10 lunch. That's really not much money for us to be putting into this. I hear, and I guess I should also reiterate, although it's been said before, that this tax is not going to be on groceries or on prescriptions. So we're really talking about the $10 lunch, 2 cents. I think we can afford that in order to get this bigger project. Finally, I guess, I did hear the discussion about whether or not St. Charles would be in on this. I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to listen to Donnybrook last night. I caught about half of it. You know, it frustrates me and saddens me that we don't act more regionally here, but that's really a subject for another day. And we have all kinds of governmental issues and structural issues that cause them to be able to opt out. And I hope that in the end they do put it on the ballot, and I hope St. Charles does end up participating with this, because I think it would be a real important contribution to the region. I mean, St. Charles is as big as the city of St. Louis now, maybe bigger. So I hope that they do. But if they opt out, that won't keep me from supporting this, because this $380 million project in downtown St. Louis and the spinoff of the economic development from that, I think will be a good project for St. Louis. And I guess finally, you know, we had talked about this, the Alderman from the 24th and I had talked about this project before, and I think that most of the major points that you were interested in getting, particularly the Citizen Advisory Committee, which I thought was a really good suggestion, is in this, and so there will be public participation and public oversight. And so I think it's worthy of our support, and I would hope that all of you will vote to put this on the ballot and encourage the voters in your neighborhoods to support this. So thank you.
If I can respond, I won't have to stand up again.
Pardon?
If I can respond now, I won't have to stand up again.
Yeah, you were asking him a question, I thought.
I was. I asked him 2 questions and then I kind of went off.
Oh, okay. All right. Would you like him to respond to the final?
Briefly.
All right. Please proceed, Alderman.
You know, I don't think a $100 million project is mediocre. You know, I think what's mediocre is when, in my neighborhood, since we don't have a sewer lateral program, since we don't charge enough to have an actual sewer lateral program, I think what's mediocre is when somebody's sewer pipe breaks in their front yard and they can't afford the $5,000 to get a contractor to come dig it out and fix it. And I see somebody go out there and dig it out themselves in their own human waste in their front yard because we don't pay for a sewer lateral program. I think that's mediocre. I think it's mediocre when buildings collapse in neighborhoods and we don't have the money to tear them down. When you got people fighting dogs in abandoned buildings in people's neighborhoods. I think that's what's truly mediocre. And I think that is what St. Louis citizens deserve to have fixed before we go for the Platinum Arch Project. So I think it's just a question of priorities. We gotta walk and chew gum at the same time, as my dad liked to say. And we should invest some money in the arch grounds, but let's just accept that that is mostly to improve a tourist experience. And I would like to invest some money in a way that improves the quality of life experience for the people who already live here. And you know, maybe we just disagree on the priorities or something. But that's kind of where
Thank you. I agree with your.
Yeah.
I agree with your priorities also. But I think we do have a sewer lateral program, if I'm not mistaken.
Only to the sidewalk, not to the house.
Okay, and I'll be happy to work with you on that.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 21st.
Testing. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. You know, complicated bills are tough to debate on the floor of the Board of Aldermen. You know, typically a lot of these more complicated issues are worked out in committee before we come out. I voted against this bill in committee for that very reason. This is a very expensive bill. It crosses several jurisdictions. It increases taxes at a time when people are hurting. And we on that committee were delivered the plan for this complicated project the day of committee. And the plan itself, and I put air quotation marks around the plan because it had less pages than I've seen in high school book reports. It was not a very thorough plan. And it took us about a good 2 hours in committee to even get to one of the biggest revelations that came out of that committee hearing, which was that of this whole project, all this oversight we're talking about only applies to 1/3 of the money. 2/3 of the money, which is privately raised, goes towards a newly formed organization whose board members are not even set yet, who have no oversight at all. So what they do is use the leverage of us increasing sales tax to be able to raise private money. Sure enough, it's for a great project. But it's not the level of oversight over up to $200 million that you would expect to come out of a project like this. Secondly, I think people have kind of short memories sometimes. We were here just 14 months ago and we passed a $64 million bond issue for parks. So we take care of our parks, and we passed that parks bond issue not long ago. What happens in a lot of these deals, what happened in that deal, what happens in this deal, is that there are some very influential folks in town, and I mean that regionally. There are very influential folks in the region who have top priorities, and for them, the Arch is a top priority. Forest Park is a top priority. Busch Stadium is a top priority. They see the city of St. Louis as a playground for the region, and we want to make sure that those amenities are nice for visitors. I completely agree with that. Those don't necessarily align themselves with the priorities of people who live in the neighborhoods in the city of St. Louis, but I understand that those are priorities for them. But what they do is they structure these deals in a way where they get the public to invest in what their priorities are, and then put in what could only be called payoff money, ways to get other folks to vote against their own interests, ways to get folks to buy into something that really does not reflect the priorities of their constituents. 14 months ago, we voted for a park bond issue. That bond issue was completely about Forest Park. I think the sponsor at the time even said that, look, this is all about Forest Park. All this other part that we're putting in there, all these other millions for these neighborhood parks are just to get the votes. But actually, Alderman from the 4th, would you yield to questions?
You have to ask me that, Alderman.
Oh, can I ask the Alderman of the 4th to yield to questions, please?
Alderman from the 4th, will you yield for questioning to the Alderman from the 21st?
Yes, sir.
Alderman from the 21st, please proceed.
Alderman from the 4th. I remember at the time of the debate in late 2011, when we were debating the park bond issue, I remember you, and I think it was Alderman from the 1st, who both said that, look, I'm only voting for this bill because we're going to get something for our neighborhoods and our parks are neglected. To this day, how much money have you gotten from that park bond issue?
I don't know how much money I've received, but I got some hot asphalt poured on the walking trail that is not defined. I still have these same buildings that I'm going to go over every time I get up. Talking about the quality of life. I still have buildings like this across the street from the park continuously. Quality of life is absolutely unacceptable. I got some hot asphalt with no lines in it. I'm not buying into it this time. But my parks are about the size of this room.
Yeah. And even if you did get that asphalt, it didn't come from that issue because those bonds that we were supposed to get never even came.
Repeat that.
The bond money from the last bond issue we passed for the parks,
Right.
Forest Park got their bonds. Our neighborhood parks did not get our bonds.
Evidently, it's evident in my community.
Okay. So in this issue, thank you, Alderman, thank you. So in this one, we've got a group wanting to give a lot of money down to the arch, wanting to improve the arch grounds, which is a noble effort. The arch is a symbol of the city and the region of St. Louis. Everybody knows St. Louis by the arch, and we want it to look top shape. But in order to get that kind of a thing passed, it's got to be worded in a way where we all get something out of it. And in this case, the payoff money was a third extra is going to go to parks again. I mean, you would think that parks are the #1 thing on our constituents' priority list, and I can assure you it's not. I mean, we have people getting killed in the streets of the city of St. Louis. There are streets you can't drive down without busting your axle. There are buildings collapsing. There are people living next to dangerous, infested buildings that they don't want their kids to play around. But we would think that our top priority is to get gold-plated playgrounds in our parks. I love our parks. O'Fallon Park is one of the defining features of the 21st Ward, and we invest in the parks, and we have a steady stream from sales tax that was already approved by voters a few years ago. We're supposed to have more money from a bond issue we passed 14 months ago, and now we're going to have even more money from this thing, but I would rather that money go towards something else that my constituents actually call me up about every day. So that's #1. #2 is that, yeah, it has been mentioned that St. Charles is already saying we don't want any parts of it, so it's already fallen down on St. Louis City and St. Louis County. So we'll see if that money gets approved. I do agree with the Alderman from the 9th that at the end of the day, what we're approving today is just to send it to the voters. And I will let the voters decide that, and we'll go with that. But we have to do our part first. And our part first is to make sure that there's oversight and that there's a responsible plan in place with how the money would be approved if the voters do approve it. Can the sponsors please yield the questions?
Alderman from the 7th, will you yield for questioning to the Alderman from the 21st?
Yes.
Alderman from the 21st, please proceed.
What organization is responsible for the fiscal oversight of the private money, which is the majority of the money for the project?
Of the private money?
Yes.
That would be the City River Arch Conservancy. I have actually pamphlets here if you would if someone would like to pass them out, to show the charts on how that would occur. And if maybe one of the cameras wants to put this in front of them, they can show the public. But basically, the private money would be administered by the City Arch River. They would raise that money, and they would administer it. The legislation says that there have to be concurrent approvals by those partners who are putting money into any project, that there is an agreement on the amount, on the project, and how much is everybody's putting in. The public dollars would be going through Great Rivers Greenway. They would administer the Prop P funds. They would then be reviewing each of the projects, and as I said, they are subject to an annual audit.
Now,
Public funds
the
would
question
come-
I'm asking about is limited. I can see that there is oversight over the public money, but the majority of this project is private money for the arts ground, correct? 2/3 of it is about private money.
Yes, this is leveraging, this bond, or this tax would leverage a bond, and the private money then would be raised by this private conservancy.
So my
It's
question is
estimated
about-
that there would be $200 million that would come from private sources to go into this project.
Okay. So my question is about the oversight over the $200 million of private money.
And so why are we, as public officials, worried about private money that's provided by private entities? I'm trying to figure this out.
I'll tell you, for two reasons. One, because they're only able to raise that money because of our leverage for passing the sales tax and the public money in the pot first, before the private money. Two, because the money, the private money, is being spent on public land. And that's why this project is completely different than the Forest Park Forever model. Because in Forest Park Forever model, though it is public money and private money, it is still a group which decides about the money and oversight of the money before it's actually gone into doing something in public land. And that's a great model. This model, this is not that model. And so we've got two flaws in this model, I would say. One is that there's no oversight over the private money. And two, we, and I mean the city of St. Louis and the people of St. Louis, don't even own the land. That's not even our land. That is federal land. And not one great idea that we want to do or that this private organization wants to do is going to be, can happen unless the National Park Service agrees to it. And the National Park Service has already struck down a lot of great ideas. And in fact, from what I understand, they've actually limited the area that we can even play with to just a few areas, which is why I think the Alderman from the 24th was making such a big point about the garage area, because that's one of the few areas that the National Park Service said, this is an area you can play with. There's just an ugly garage down there. If you tear down this garage, you can do what you want to do there.
Well, first of all, I'd say that, yes, this is a unique project. There has to be concurrent approval by Great Rivers Greenways Board, by the National Park Service, and by the City Arch River Group. Those all have to work in a coordinated effort in order to make this plan happen. And I would say to you that this has been a planning process that's been going on for 7 years. There have been 2 major public meetings announced in the newspapers down at the convention center. People have, the designer for this program has come in from New York to do a phenomenal design. He is noted throughout the world for the designs that have been completed. Metro, that owns the garage, has been a component and a participant in all the planning effort and are supportive of the garage going away. They are looking at what opportunities there would be on the riverfront, where they now provide the helicopter rides, the boat rides, the bicycle rentals, for them to do revenues there. They recognize that this is a unique opportunity for our community to build something that is phenomenal. It is not a mediocre, oh, we can't afford to do anything because we're a poor city. People like exciting places to be. If you've gone to City Gardens and seen the change that happened there when you had a flat piece of ground with sidewalks around it to what it is today, and you go there on a summer day, people of all nationalities are there. old people, people with their grandkids, women with their babies. Everybody is at City Garden because it is a phenomenal place. It's gotten national and international awards. It is what we're trying to create with the plan that would be funded with the 3/16 sales tax that would cost the average family in the region $25 a year. It would make an incredible difference in not only the tourism here, but also in the attitude of the people who live in the community, because they could say, we live in a phenomenal region. We support things that are wonderful for our families. We are building our community daily.
Thank you.
I got a little emotional, sorry.
That's okay. You know, there has been a philosophy in place, it seems, at least in the leadership in the city for a long time, that to save the city of St. Louis and to stop population loss, it's only going to take the next big thing. The next big thing is going to save the city. Building a new baseball stadium, it's going to save the city. The Great Washington Avenue project, all these great things that we do, I have no doubt that if you spend tens of millions of dollars in a small area, geographic area, you're going to greatly improve that area and you're going to get more people to come. But the effect on the entire city, we can see after 10 years, has not had the desired effect. And so I don't think anybody can argue that downtown looks better. Washington Avenue looks better. The city garden is a wonderful thing. I enjoy taking my family there when I can. But what's happening north of that and south of that is continued population loss. People continue to leave the city. People are still afraid to live in certain neighborhoods in the city. Buildings are still falling down. Our infrastructure is falling down. And there is not one single project that's going to save that. What we have to do is start focusing our resources on where people live. We have to focus our resources on those neighborhoods where those folks who have stuck it out, who are long-term citizens of the city of St. Louis, who have made a commitment to this place, who call themselves St. Louisans, where they are. And I think we need to start spending some money and some resources where those folks live. I don't buy the philosophy that the next big project is going to save the city. I don't buy that a $300 million project on the Arch is going to save my neighborhood, is going to save Alderman Moore's neighborhood. And in fact, if you look at the statistics, all the money that we've invested in downtown, we've had a lot of people move downtown, I think you would say. Do you know that downtown still has less folks than live in the Ville neighborhood? But they don't get the same kind of service or the same kind of investment. And the Alderman from 4th has begged and begged us down here to start taking his problem seriously of buildings falling down and abandoned properties in his neighborhood. No more resources go there. There's no sales tax to go help that problem. In fact, we're operating on a budget right now that has 100 less police officers on the street. 100 less. But we're going to raise our sales tax, or ask our folks to raise our sales tax to beautify something that, quite frankly, and let's be real, a lot of our citizens don't go to that often. How often do we go up in the Arch? I take a few visitors every now and then, but I tell you where I take them more: the coffee shops in my neighborhood, the parks in my neighborhood, the attractions around our community, and I think that's what we need to be investing in. I think this comes down to priorities, period. At the end of the day, I think the votes are here to let it go out and let the citizens decide. But I think the citizens are going to have a tough choice to make. What is our priority? Do we want to continue on this plan to make the city of St. Louis merely the playground for other folks? Or are we going to invest in the people who live in our city, invest in those neighborhoods, and make it safe for everybody?
All right, thank you. Anyone for the first time? Anyone for the first time? Alderman from the 19th, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. As I read through this document that was just passed out, I think there may be one thing that we could request that I think would satisfy some folks. When I look at the representation strategy here for the Citizens Advisory Committee. The categories here will probably cover everyday residents from all of our neighborhoods, but I think that we could also ask for some designations as well. So to represent the community with people who we believe, because you know we got this personal thing about it, the alderman has to say it. If we could identify 4 people that we all could agree on, which would represent north, south, central, and downtown, I think that might help us a little bit. But I still don't think that there's anything else wrong with the process. The process is one that we have used for many projects in the city of St. Louis. We've raised even more money on some of those projects. And this partnership is no different from how we run the airport, because we have all these different municipalities that have say-so about what happens there. We have appointed representatives from the cities and government officials. So it's no different from any of those kinds of entities that are regional operations on behalf of the city of St. Louis County, and sometimes the region as a whole. So I don't want to get lost in all of that, but what I do want to do is make sure that we all agree that we will have the opportunity to have some representation that is absolutely designated by this entity. And that's the only thing that I would request to make this a little bit, probably a little bit more palatable for some people if that happened. And I'm sure we all can throw some names in a pot, and we probably, you know, we all know the same people. We know how willing they'll be to be present. That's another thing. I don't want anybody recommending somebody because they're your friend and your relative. We need somebody who's going to be there, who's going to give us a report back on what's happening, and who's going to give great input. So that's the only thing. And if, Mr. President, if I could ask the sponsor if that's something they'd be willing to try to negotiate.
Sponsor yield for question until the Alderman from the 19th.
Yes, and I did hear your comments and would be happy to work with you on that.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 20th, you're recognized.
Mr. President, for the first time, actually. Thank you. I'm excited about the opportunities that are presented here by this board bill, but my enthusiasm has been tempered quite a bit by the experience that I have every day, and some of you have reflected on some of that in your own communities. I live in a wonderful community. I mean, we all live in wonderful wards, and we don't have enough time here to, to tout all of that. We just gave an Emmy for some of the reflection of that to the Convention and Visitors Commission. But we also have those other parts of our community, and not only our community, but the entire country. I know we say that we're in a recession. We're in an economic depression. Many of our communities are in very fiscally trying times. I was supportive and continue to be supportive of the greenways and the parks and all that. I think it's critical that we make sure that we're not diverting the monies that belong there from those areas. All of us, what can we say that we would not be St. Louisans if we didn't respect the downtown area and its connection to the arch and all of that. But there are these needs that are there. I mean, when I reflect, this is not in my ward, it's in the 25th ward. The fact that we have a closed high school, Cleveland High School, and we keep wondering why the crime rate is skyrocketing in some of the area around that. All you have to do is look at that institution that is begging for the public schools to be there. Alderman Ortman and I are proud graduates, as is Carol Howard, Alderwoman Howard, I believe. Or she was there, she worked there. But that's not the only reason. All you have to do is go there to look at that. And we are not investing. We are not investing where we need to do. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be investing in the arch. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be investing in the parks and so forth. But these are really trying times, and I'm sure that that's what's going to be reflected as voters go to the polls. I just want to explain the reason why I'm going to vote for this is because we're ultimately leaving it up to the voters. But I don't think this is necessarily a slam dunk. And we've got to figure out ways, You know, I hadn't even reflected on what the alderman from the 24th Ward was talking about in terms of the lateral sewers. We've got people who can't afford that $5,000 to $7,000 to $10,000 sewer to live in their house when we've got these sewers that have been around for 150 years, maybe only 100 years in your area, Alderman. But I also reflect on the fact that for whatever reason, and part of it's our fault, I'm sure, as a city, but the state legislature presented enabling legislation. Their enabling legislation doesn't allow us at this point to pass a tax that would be used for those sewers. It doesn't enable us to do something about Cleveland High School at this point. It doesn't allow us to do what I think we really should be doing in terms of, rather than tearing down buildings, to be able to stabilize them, to be able to get there and rebuild some of the brick walls in the back that have fallen down because the gutters and the downspouts have fallen off. We could work on that. We could put the gutters and the downspouts, and we could put a little bit of roofing, and that would be preserved for future development. But they haven't passed that enabling legislation. But maybe we need to start being more creative and looking at that and doing what somebody else suggested. I think you suggested, Alderman, of walking and chewing gum at the same time. It's not a either or, it's a both and, but it's very frustrating. This process has been very frustrating to me. I've talked to some of the folks that are presenting this. I have the greatest respect for the folks that are presenting this opportunity to us. But I had to honestly say to them that my heart is heavy with the sorrow of many people who will be asked to go to the polls and support something that's very critical to this region, and yet in their daily lives they will be suffering through, even in the greatest communities that we have, they will continue to suffer, sometimes for no good reason, because we don't have the money to invest in that quality of life for which we've all devoted our lives.
Alderman from the 25th.
I'm going to keep this short. You know, I personally share a lot of the sentiments that have been, you know, vocal or voiced this morning. I don't know about my colleagues, but, you know, I've had constituents on both sides of the issue who have called me and emailed me, and, you know, far be it from me to begrudge them the opportunity to vote on something like this. And so, you know, I will be voting in favor of this because, you know, I think it is their right, you know, as citizens of the city to be able to make that decision as well. And while I do share in a lot of the sentiments that have been, you know, voiced this morning, I think that is, for me, you know, what is going to be my ultimate decision on this as well.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I don't want anyone to get anything twisted. I love St. Louis, but I'm sitting down here to represent the people of the 4th. I hear you mumbling and you're moaning and you're groaning when I get up to speak about these buildings that I'm going to keep talking about until something is settled, until we get a better quality of life in this community. People get up behind me and try to criticize me about my community. I was sent down here by the people of the 4th Ward to represent them with the 25 or more years of disparity that has gone on in these communities. And you're telling me about the parks. Gary, you do a great job, but we are more than just parks in the 4th Ward because we don't even have parks. But I want everyone to know that in the 4th Ward, we are doing our very best to make things happen. Now, a lot of people have a way of advising me during the board bills, it's a nice time and you need my help. But what about in between? I've been there 6 years. And to no avail have we gotten much of anything done with the exception of some monies that were left over. And everyone, and please, I beg you, don't criticize what I'm talking about in the 4th Ward because no one knows about the 4th Ward more than this alderman about this community. That group that was up there today, Kojic, sometimes 40 to 60,000 people come into this community, into St. Louis. Downtown, whoop-de-doo, fine, all well, that's good. The Gateway Arch, I worked as a carpenter rebuilding the museum in the Gateway Arch. But we bring $40 to $50 million to this city every year, and I can't even bring that organization, which I am a part of, a co-convener, I can't even bring them to the 4th Ward. They came to the 4th Ward called Kojic Care. They came in and helped clean up a very depressed area that we had in the community. It is unacceptable, and the quality of life is absolutely none. The proposal that you offered, the Alderwoman of the 19th, I would doubt if it get in the bill, and this is going to pass. But I am not in support of this until we get something done in this community. And all those who want to advise me, bring it on and give me some advice for the next 2 years that I'll be in office, because I know you're coming. But for the next 2 years that I'm in office, I will continue to fight for the people in the 4th Ward, because this is absolutely incredible. It is behind that arch wall, when you get up past Vanderbilt, and you start seeing the other side of St. Louis. It is unacceptable. It is a deplorable place. We live in a third world community. Yabba dabba doo. We live like the Flintstones compared to the Jetsons, but we're not having a gay old time. And we need to get in there and do something about this community and stop playing games with the people who pay the same taxes that you pay. We pay the same taxes as this polarized place, this Delmar Boulevard is a DMZ, and we pay the same taxes. We don't pay a PMT tax, which is a poor man tax. We pay the exact same thing, and we should receive the same thing. I don't know what my colleagues, my predecessors before me did, but I am here to fight for the right of the people in the 4th Ward, and until we get that, I will not be voting on a great rate green. Wherever you walk down there, we will not be down there walking, because we're too disparate. We don't have the money to get downtown to get down to walk at the arch.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 13th?
Thank you, Mr.
Hold on
President.
for a second. Alderman from the 1st, Alderman from the 1st? I can't tell if you want to be. All right, Alderman from the 1st.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I couldn't tell if you were up there or not.
I was yielding to seniority, and weight, and presence, and age.
But he didn't say beauty.
And beauty. But on a serious note, I agree with the Alderman from the 4th. It's very, very difficult to come and vote for a sales tax, which by its nature alone is regressive and impact negatively on many, if not all, of our constituents. And when he talks about the 4th Ward, I feel the same way about the 1st Ward. And because of the lack of goods and services being provided to North St. Louis as a whole, when it comes to issues like this issue, which is not a North St. Louis issue, it's not a South St. Louis issue, but it is an issue that's much larger than both North and South St. Louis. And that is a 19-mile riverfront. We are one of the few cities in the entire country that has a 19-mile riverfront. And when you think about a 19-mile riverfront, and you think about the money, the energy, the potential for development, all you have to do is go to any large port authority, where you start up in Chicago with St. Lawrence Seaway, come all the way down, you go down to Kaskaskia, you come up the river, you look at you go to New Orleans, you go to Philadelphia, you go anywhere, and you look at those riverfronts and you look at how those riverfronts generate unlimited amount of dollars over and over and over every year, the tourism and and you look at St. Louis, and you look, we are right in the bend of the Illinois is in the bend of the river, and if you look at how that river dredges itself and the engineering that takes place every year on the north, on the Missouri side of the river, it's unbelievable. When you look at the wealth that the riverfront creates and develops, and I think that's the pity of all of this, is that people don't know, and those issues where you have benefits like the river, they don't filter down into the wards and the communities that need it best. But what I'm disappointed about is that this project only addresses 1.6 miles when you have the rest of the riverfront, which my colleagues referred to, is still just sitting there and it's been sitting there. And it calls the question, well, who controls the riverfront? Who controls it now? Who is the regional port authority right now? I didn't see that anywhere in this document or in these documents that anybody stated that the regional port authority has a place in here and how much contribution they're adding to this process. Now, when you look at the regional port authority, I think the regional port authority might be referred to in this document as Metro. But Metro is not the regional port authority. And then you look at who sits on the board and who appoints the board members to the regional port authority or Metro's board or bi-state's board, however you want to refer to it. So when it comes to bigger issues like this is when the pain of the neglect of North St. Louis surfaces, and you have the kind of opposition. Now, my opposition is not to the project. My opposition is primarily to the sales tax. And I'm torn, having worked in transportation for years. I understand the need and understand the benefit of the river. But I'm not benefiting from the benefits that the river offers to certain people, and certain families, and certain groups. And until we start including all of us into our assets, the river is an unbelievable asset, but we don't benefit from it. So I think that being a city, not within a county, is an asset in some cases. In this case, I think it's more of a liability than an asset. And I just want to say unequivocally that I am diametrically opposed to sales taxes. In this case, I'm torn between the bigger picture in terms of how can we grow the rest of the river out of this project. And that would cause me to say that with the people I've talked to, everybody have a problem. But then a lot of us do see the bigger picture. And if you can see the bigger picture, then I can vote, stand here and say I'll vote to give the people an opportunity to vote. But I will tell them in front that the sales tax is a regressive one. But the bigger picture is really greater than all the St. Louis City put together, and that is the river. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from 13th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I rise in support. I'm going to vote for this bill, which allows it to be before the public on April 2nd. That's it. I do have, I would say, an objection to a reference made by the Alderwoman from the 24th Ward when she was describing the arch grounds as this project.
Alderman from 13th, you said the Alderwoman from the 24th Ward. You mean the Alderman from the 24th Ward?
I'm sorry, the Alderwoman from the 28th Ward.
8th Ward. There, all right,
28th Ward.
All right, thank you.
When she was describing the upscale version of the Arch Grounds project, she referred to it as BMW. Now, some of us may drive these foreign cars, but when we're debating, we ought to be using, we're talking about an upscale project, we ought to be using a Cadillac or some other car that's imported from Detroit. Thank you.
Alderman from 17, you're recognized.
Mr. President, I don't know how I can respond after the Alderman from the 13th after his insightful comments, but if I could get serious for a second. I had planned not to talk today, but I'm kind of embarrassed, frankly, about some of the discussion that happened down here. I know that some people, for philosophical reasons, may have a problem with sales tax, certainly the priorities in which we spend money, but the notion of going ahead and being different so that we can go ahead and read about ourselves in the newspaper is I sense, a growing trend down here, and it's embarrassing. I sit here, and I'm a finance guy, and I look at all these things with numbers, and what just boggles my mind, I'm standing up because I want to apologize to the courageous politicians in St. Louis County who voted to put this thing on the ballot. And we're sitting down here making this big stink over something that is, we should be grateful that St. Louis County is considering this. Now, I am very, very empathetic when somebody says that they have a home repair that they can't afford to make, or that we have crime in the city that we don't have the resources to fight. Unfortunately, though, I would find it difficult to imagine a world in which we'll be a political world, the political real world, where we can go ahead and ask St. Louis County to come in and devote the amount of resources that they're talking about doing to go ahead and give that money to the city so that we can help solve those problems. I also don't imagine a world where we're going to go ahead and find someone coming along willing to give us several $100 million to go ahead and address some of those problems. As serious as they are, and as empathetic as we want to be, the reality is I don't think that's going to happen. Now, as it turns out, parks, because of just what they are, it's easier to go ahead and get people to support those. And the magnitude of support that we're talking about, almost defies my imagination that we would go ahead and have courageous politicians in the county and hopefully empathetic voters in the county who think regionally, who may not want to support us on crime or repairing some of our homes or doing all these things that we all know need to be done, but who might help support us in creating an iconic park symbol of our region that everyone throughout the world can recognize as St. Louis, which is what the arch is now and what this proposal will only signify in the future. The park system along the lake in Chicago was a remarkable park system. The Buckingham Fountain that is the centerpiece of downtown was spectacular, but when the citizens of Chicago decided to improve that by putting in Millennium Park, it's been a huge success up there. To go ahead and put this in perspective, the portion of the county taxes that would be going into downtown to support that project is in excess of all the money that the city of St. Louis would be putting in. The city of St. Louis would be putting in about $2 million downtown, less than 2, I'm sorry, about 1.7 or so a year. And St. Louis County would be putting in close to $7.5 million a year, which exceeds the amount of the entire amount of taxes that the city of St. Louis would pay. So our leverage on that, particular piece is 4 to 1. If we go ahead and take a look at it holistically, for every dollar the city's putting into city parks anywhere, we're getting $1 from the county being put into downtown. In addition to that, what's becoming available from the private sector, if they're successful in raising their several $100 million that they're talking about, is probably another $10 or $15 million a year that won't cost the city of St. Louis taxpayers anything. Now, I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination on the economic impact of tourism, but just my little back of the envelope calculation tells me that if you come to St. Louis for a stay of, say, 3 days, and you're going to end up spending $1,000, you're going to pay sales taxes on that whole period. If you're downtown, they're going to really nail you because you'll have hotel taxes down there. And you're going to end up probably paying, I don't know, $15 or so in taxes. Yeah, excuse me, $150 in taxes. And that's going to have a ripple effect, because if you're downtown, somebody's going to be working at the hotel that you're staying at, and they're going to be paying taxes and so forth. But by my estimation, we need to pick up probably 50 or 60 visitors a day in a downtown hotel, and they will more than pay for the city's portion of this taxes. And if we do this right, and people come, and the numbers, that might come, all of a sudden we might have a source of revenue to fix that sewer pipe, to hire additional police officers, and if we have thousands of people down on the riverfront, guess what? It's safer, and we need less people down there patrolling. So, this rationale of, oh yeah, there are other priorities, I agree with you. Our city has a very long list of priorities, and would this be the first way that I'd want to spend my money, if I had my druthers? No. But I tell you, when you go ahead and you take a look at it holistically, I think we're going ahead and sending a terrible message to the residents of our city and the courageous politicians and the regionally minded people in St. Louis County who are willing to go ahead to the polls and show up and vote for something like this. For us to sit down here and say, it's not a good enough deal, give me a break. And so that's all I want to do. I want to stand up and publicly thank the elected officials in St. Louis County who did this. I would encourage the residents of St. Charles to go ahead and think regionally and help us too. And I'm embarrassed that I have to stand up and that we have to, defend some of the comments that some people made down here. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 11th, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to speak in favor of Board Bill 258. Mr. President, I applaud the alderman from the 7th in certainly trying to keep the focus on exactly what this proposal before us actually does. As I sat here this morning, we have let this thing evolve into a blemish report. And I can tell you that the people that I represent in South St. Louis, we've got a lot of blemishes in the 11th Ward also. But the fact of the matter is, if you understand taxation, and I don't, never have, probably never will, this is an opportunity that has been given to us by the Missouri General Assembly to, in effect, make a tremendous impact on the St. Louis metropolitan region. Mr. President, we have been studying the riverfront for a long, long time. For those of, as I look around, there's a few of us, but in 1953, when my father and Mayor Tucker, after 9 o'clock Mass, would go drive around, and the two of them personally tried to pollute the air with cigars and cigarettes as much as they possibly could. We've been studying the river. We've got riverfront studies since, the 50s. Fact of the matter is, if we took all those riverfront reports and dropped them in the river today, we'd probably get the river level to rise to a point where we can increase barge traffic. And that, in fact, seems to be a problem. The region wins with this. Certainly St. Louis City wins with this. And the fact of the matter is, I stand here as someone that opposed the Parks bond issue because I thought we were stupid to incur more debt for a park system, which I happen to think functions pretty well with its current funding level. But I'm only one of 28, and that's what makes this process kind of fun. We all have different priorities, and if this bill were to be rated on a priority scale, I can tell you from a personal standpoint, I loathe a sales tax. I would say that 65% of the people in the 11th Ward, this is a silent killer. They go pay a sales tax, and oftentimes, if you shop at the biggest development in my ward, because of the other wonderful government subsidies that we have allocated to that with a TIF and a CID and a partridge in a pear tree, they're paying more sales tax. But the fact of the matter is, this is a regional approach. Whether we like it or not, some very, very good people in this city have adopted a bridle of trying to move this region forward by putting their money where their mouth is. International design competition is cited by the lady from the 7th. I mean, this thing just didn't fall out of a tree somewhere. Is there some, we found out on our Parks Committee, is there additional oversight needed? Probably. But the fact of the matter is, conspiracy theories are wonderful, but what we have here again is an opportunity for the citizens of this region and a lot of private money coming together to make that riverfront possibly work. Whether we like it or not, that Mississippi River in our area does not want to be tamed. Whether we like it or not, we're not going to get the San Antonio River walk there because that's a mean, unpredictable river that does not want to be controlled. This particular plan, whether or not it's the Cadillac plan, Alderman from the 13th, or is it in fact the Cadillac plan? In my humble opinion, yes, but the fact of the matter is, there's been a lot of sweat equity put into this particular project, and I think it would be extremely short-sighted for the citizens of this region not to examine it, and if they think that we can continue to make the St. Louis Gateway Arch our regional icon, the right thing to do is to not only for us to support it, but for the voters at the polls to support it. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 18th.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board. I too am one of those aldermen that have been historically opposed to sales tax increases. I believe that they're generally regressive. I share that with the alderman from the 1st and echo some of the comments of the alderman from the 11th as it relates to sales tax. This one seems to be structured a little differently in that from my understanding, it excludes food and prescription drugs, if I'm understanding correctly. That's a little bit different than what I've seen before. I have historically voted against them here on the board because of a philosophical difference in my both understanding and seeing the application of sales tax increases. Certainly this is a project that has merit. There have been others that have been mentioned. So in that regard, I too am a little torn on this because of the benefit that it does bring to the city. However, I just wanted to go on record to point out that I'm one of those that was philosophically opposed to a sales tax increase and sales taxes in general. However, I would applaud the efforts of the alderman from the 7th, but just remind us not to try to necessarily belittle in our minds the other issues that have been raised that are just as important, that we need to maybe have a larger or a longer collective discussion about and really try to find some additional ways to solve those problems about the buildings falling and the crime issues. And I'm sure that this board has the will to do that and will do it. So with that, Mr. President, those are my comments.
All right, any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 21st.
Thank you, Mr. President. As long as someone else had something to say that has not spoken before, I did want to clear up a couple of comments that were made. Number one of the consequences of the city of St. Louis being as divided as we are, we have poor neighborhoods, rich neighborhoods, black neighborhoods, white neighborhoods, affluent, and very, very poor neighborhoods. And so sometimes down here, it feels like we are speaking about different cities, like we don't live in the same place. And several of us down here represent just different constituents. And so I think some of the comments made by some people earlier reflect the constituents that they represent. But if you look on an economic level, the constituents that we represent have a median income of at least $15,000, $20,000 per year less. These are poor folks, And so we are asked a different thing when we go to our constituents and ask poor folks to pay more for something that we know that they won't use, when we know that they come to us with a series of other priorities. So our challenge is different for those of us who represent poor folks. Number two, the idea that somehow people are courageous, or politicians are courageous by increasing the sales tax is ridiculous. And that sales tax is going to be completely paid for by the people who live in St. Louis County is also not true. Let me tell you, we don't have a Walmart in my neighborhood, but everybody in my neighborhood shops at Walmart, and they go out to St. Louis County to pay their money. So that sales tax that St. Louis County would also be approving is going to be paid for by a lot of St. Louis City people that we represent. So let's not think that this is just something that's going to be on the backs of just St. Louis County people and the St. Louis County tax. That's paid for by St. Louis City people as well. There's a lot of shopping on both sides of that county-city line. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Any further discussion?
1 minute.
Alderwoman from the 19th, you're recognized for discussion on Board Bill 258.
On discussion on Board Bill 258,
To perfection the board.
to further clarify representation by any alderman, you represent your constituency as you see it every day, and all of our constituents have various issues that they deal with, whether it's economic, health, education, whatever. But our goal and our position as legislators is to make sure that we don't keep them in that position that they're in the lower economic echelon, but to provide and support economic development and encourage it to be brought to the city so that they can have access to and move up out of that lower economic level that they're in. So these type of initiatives will give them some of those opportunities, and they won't stay in the same place. So I'm not going to continue to stand here and watch and listen to us going, oh, woe is me and they, because your job as a legislator is to improve those opportunities for those residents, to continue to educate them, make sure they have the resources and knowledge and understanding of growth and how it happens. Now, today, tomorrow, and the next day, I'm going to be supportive of improving what is going on in the 4th Ward, because the 19th Ward used to look like that. We had more abandoned buildings and lots than anybody in the city of St. Louis. But it does require plan, and it requires support from the city as a whole. And I think we can get there if we have the right type of discussions. So I just wanted to clear that up about our constituency and how we represent.
Thank you. Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. Some of us have inherited great communities and don't have to go through the disparity and the problems that we have in the 4th Ward. So don't insult the 4th Ward by saying that we're trying to keep them down. We work very hard to make sure that the people, shame on you, St. Louis. Shame on St. Louis for letting the people of this city live like this and squallow in this disparate, polarized place. And I am doing everything I can in my power. And if you have any advice for me, you can advise me after this meeting.
Alderwoman from the 19th, you've had your opportunity.
We have inherited great communities. Some of us have, and we don't have the same thing that the 4th Ward have. We have a problem over there that's been disparate for over 25 years. Where are we and where have we been, those that are criticizing the 4th Ward? Thank you.
All right. And then moving forward, everybody here understands the rules. You guys address me. You guys don't address each other. So, Alderman from the 21st, you recognize on the discussion of perfection of Board Bill number 258, and you can address me.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will address you. I feel like, the comments made by President Obama a few months ago, I feel like I need to remind some of my colleagues, you didn't build that, okay? You didn't build that. A lot of us in our wards don't have institutions like St. Louis University, Washington University, Forest Park Forever, these great institutions that put together these master plans and fund projects like this, like the Arch Project. We don't have that. And so I feel offended that our wards are belittled when you come to us and ask us to ask our folks to pay more sales tax for your projects, and we say, by the way, we've got big problems too. Can you help us out? And they say, well, you're just not doing your part. Why don't you have a institution to fix your problem for you? So to those comments, I think we are rightly offended by comments like that.
All right. Any further discussion? Any further discussion on the perfection of Board Bill number 258? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 7th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to point out that County Council passed perfected this bill out there last Tuesday with 1 minute debate. So this is truly democracy in action today. I'd like to point out that the City Arch River 2015 plan is designed to encourage visitors to stay longer in the area and increase the number of visitors to the Arch. We've talked a lot about that tourism industry this morning. If those out-of-town Arch visitors stay a half day longer in the area, and the visitation returns to what it had previously been of 3.2 million, the added direct and multiplier impacts of this plan will create 4,400 jobs. So that alone is going to generate as much revenue as an additional Cardinals baseball season every year, or more than 4 NCAA men's Final Four tournaments. I don't know how it is with you, but we've talked about disparity here. We've talked about the jobs. We've talked about incomes. When I go down to the Westin, I see the doorman. He knows me because I will see him in my neighborhood at a music venue listening to music, same music I'm hearing. When I went to hear the State of the Region at the convention center, the server said to me, "Phyllis, you want some coffee?" People in my ward are working those jobs. That's what we're here about, is providing jobs for our constituents, because with those jobs, they're going to be able to fix that lateral sewer. They're going to be able to pay their taxes. They're going to be able to send their kids to school. They're going to be able to buy those things that they'll be paying the sales tax for. But they will live in a better community because they have a job and they feel better about their future and the future of their kids. With that, I'm going to renew my motion and ask that you think about this and support sending this sales tax to the ballot so that the voters can consider what kind of community they want to live in and what they're supporting in that community. We all have our issues and priorities. We've all been here and we know the problems the city faces. This is a way to resolve one of them, and I ask for your support on this bill.
All right, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 15th, that we perfect Board Bill number 258. Is there a request for roll call? It's been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman True. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnoldwitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed,
Aye.
Alderman Boyd, "24 aye votes, 3 no votes, 1 present."
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderwoman from the 7th and perfected Board Bill number 258.
That's the extent of board bills for perfection.
Third reading consent.
Board Bill 256, 195, 196, 197, and 257.
Alderman from the 13th, you recognize on the third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I move for a third reading and final passage of the aforementioned bill on the consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 12th. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Troop? I didn't hear you. Alderwoman Flowers? Alderman Bosley? Alderman Moore? Alderwoman Hubbard? Alderwoman Young? Alderman Conway? Alderman Ortman? Alderman Vollmer? Alderman Villa? Alderman Arnowitz? Alderman Wessels? Alderwoman Howard? Alderwoman Florida? Alderwoman Behringer? Alderman Rhodey? Alderman Kennedy? Alderwoman Davis? Alderwoman Davis? Alderman Schmid? Alderman French? Alderman Boyd? Alderman Vaccaro? Alderman Ogilvy? Alderman Cone? Alderman Williamson? Alderman Carter? Alderwoman Cruzen? President Reed?
Aye.
Alderman Boyd? 28 aye votes, no votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion on the Alderman from the 13th and third read and finally pass the aforementioned bills.
That's the extent of third reading consent.
We dispense with line item 18, report of enrollment.
Board Bills 256, 195, 196, 197, and 257.
All other business being suspended, the President shall in open session affix his signature hereto to the end that these may become law. First reading of resolutions.
Resolution 209, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, the Board of Aldermen approved the 2013 Central West and South Special Business District budget.
Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on the first reading of resolution 209.
Yes, Mr. President, I seek unanimous consent.
Hearing no objection, please proceed, Alderman.
Mr. President, I'd like to move that we pass Resolution 209, which is the budget for the special taxing district, which is located entirely in the 17th Ward.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 17th. I entertain a second item, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution 210, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, the Board of Aldermen approved the 2013 Central West End Southeast Special Business District budget.
Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on the first reading of resolution number 210.
Yes, Mr. President, I seek unanimous consent.
Hearing no objection, please proceed, Alderman.
Yes, Mr. President, I move for passage of Resolution 210. It's a...
Been moved by the Alderman from the 17th and seconded by the Alderman from the 24th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution 211, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, the Board of Aldermen calls upon the appropriate departments of the city government to commission a disparity study to establish the continuing legal validity of its minority and women business enterprise program and its workforce diversity goals.
Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the first reading of resolution number 211.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I would move that resolution 211 be placed in the Transportation Committee.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 18th. I entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, please sign resolution number 211 to transportation.
So noted. That's the extent of first reading of resolutions.
We'll dispense with line item 22, miscellaneous unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Tuesday, Ways and Means Committee meeting at 9 a.m. in the Leisure Room. Also on Tuesday, a housing meeting at 10 a.m. in the Kennedy Room. Also on Tuesday, Parks Committee meeting, 1:30 p.m. in the Kennedy Room. Friday, full board meeting, 10 a.m. in the chambers, and also that is the last day to introduce legislation. That's the extent of my announcement.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from the 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. You kind of heard earlier this announcement, but as usual, it's kind of like a ritual. I would like to wish a happy birthday to my twin brother from the 10th Ward on Sunday. And hopefully, he'll have a wonderful, fantastic birthday. Even though we're twins, he's a little bit older than I am, so just kind of figure that out.
And I think he's speaking second. That's a bad place to be with the Alderman from the 10th. Alderman from the 10th, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, it was on this day almost 49 years ago, my younger brother caused his mother go into labor for 37 hours, once again showing that he never likes to be on time for anything. He tells me he plans on retiring soon, but I tell him his children have to go to college much longer. No student loans are available for you, I told you that. So, no, wish Jeffrey Bard a happy 49th birthday. He says next year he'll be 50 and he'll be old, old, old. I don't think that's true. Congratulations, Jeffrey.
Happy birthday to both of them. Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. Tonight there will be a prayer vigil for Ms. Tabitha Milton Rush at Sumner High School from 6:45 to 7:45 p.m. That's at 4268 West Cottage. This is a young lady that was killed and her body was dumped in Illinois. We're having a second prayer vigil, a Stop the Violence prayer vigil tomorrow between 3 and 4 p.m. for Miss Ebony Jackson, the young lady that was found in the trunk of the car whose baby was abandoned in Bridgeton, and they found her in the trunk of the car. This will be at Greg Chapel tomorrow between 3 and 4 p.m. at 4433 Elm Bank in the area where her body was found. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tuesday the 8th, Coach Ray Cliff, a legend from Cleveland High School, passed away, and his visitation will be at the South County Cudis Sunday the 13th from 2 to 9. My wife and I were fortunate enough, this man was inducted in the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame and then also the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame. And when I say that he was a legend, not only with the records from baseball and football that he did, but also every, I think, human that he touched there. A lot of us kids grew up into adults because of his leadership. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 21st.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to announce that the ribbon cutting on the O'Fallon Park Recreation Center is next Saturday, the 19th, The official opening is the Monday, the 21st. You can buy memberships today at the Monsanto YMCA. And tomorrow at 10 a.m., the O'Fallon Neighborhood Association will be having their first neighborhood meeting inside the rec center at 10 o'clock for all O'Fallon neighborhood residents.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. First, I'd like to congratulate the women behind the badge, and most especially Captain Rochelle Jones and Sergeant Cheryl Orange for their intense opportunity that they provided for women police officers from St. Louis City and County to have a voice, a conversation, and to look forward to supporting and planning for their futures. So I had the opportunity to be a part of that, and I'm very excited about it. I think it has a lot of opportunities for us, most especially retaining the officers. So I was very proud to be there. Also, tomorrow at Vashon High School, we'll have a literacy program that will be taught there from 10 to 12. Food will be provided and childcare. I wanted to remind and thank the Metro Theater Company, which is a new theater company in Grand Center. They will be producing Jackie and Me, the Jackie Robinson story, at the Edison Theater. It opens tonight, and it runs for 2 weeks. So hopefully you'll have an opportunity to see it. And lastly, please attend the Martin Luther King program at Harris Stowe at 6:30 tomorrow. I think you will find it exciting and interesting. The presentation is going to be made by the guest speaker from Atlanta, Ms. Zenobia Clayton, who is one of the first women to have her own TV show on Ted Turner's station. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Alderwoman. Alderman from the 18th.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to announce a Transportation Committee meeting for next Thursday, 1 p.m. in the Leisure Room. And then I would also caution the aldermen from the 22nd and the 10th about all those twin jokes.
What time?
He has a twin. I've seen him with my own two eyes. Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from 13, you recognize on the motion to excuse.
Thank you, Mr. President. All aldermen are present.
You recognize on the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adjourn the meeting until Friday, 10 a.m., January 18th.
Moved by the Alderman from 13, seconded by the Alderman from the 11th. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned.